Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Valerie Gangas, who's here to share with us her new book, In Deep Shift, Riding the Waves of Change to Find Peace, Fulfillment, and Freedom. So welcome to the show, Valerie Gangas.
Thank you for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, like everybody else, I had a lot of ups and downs in my life, and I started to realize that these extreme things that were happening were actually leading me to a greater path and opening me up. And I started making the connection and then realized, you know what? There were times I felt really alone in these processes that were occurring every few years. And I wanted to write a book for people so they didn't feel alone. So they felt like someone was understanding what was happening to them and didn't think it was strange.
It seems that a lot of people are going through some type of discord right now or another. So what does it mean to be in deep shift?
I think when you have something major happen in your life that really, it fundamentally changes who you are as a person, it's hard to navigate those waters. And at times you can feel, really distraught over it because you aren't the same person. And the people around you, may not understand. You have different things that you're interested in. You don't want to live the same way. Everything pretty much changes. So it's hard. It's actually very difficult to make it through that process and break through to the other side and say, no, this is who I am. And this is how I'm going to live now. For me, it felt like I needed a lot of extra support to make it through those times.
And so as people are moving through a deep shift, what are some of the telltale signs? Because you may have some folks that are saying, well, my job's going okay, everything's going fine. So I don't know if I'm actually fitting within this paradigm of going through a major consciousness shift.
So the path is different for everyone. For me, it started when I lost my mom back in 2011. It hit me like a hurricane, and it brought me to my knees. I was severely depressed. I had really bad anxiety. I was suicidal. And in my case, I learned to meditate. And in one meditation, I went from feeling suicidal to really and truly feeling like I was in a state of ecstasy. So for me, it was very clear. Well, it's not clear, but it happened quickly. And that shift of consciousness that day that I learned to meditate changed everything. Now, for someone else, someone could have a near-death experience. That's a real game changer. Or they lose all their money, or they get a divorce. It's usually on the heels of something major happening in your life. But I have met people that, have gone on a teacher training, yoga retreat and broken open like that. So I'd say from my research and experience, 9 times out of 10, this shift happens after a major event in your life. But it is possible that it could happen through, Reiki or meditation or something like that. And then you will just know, wait, I am not the same person, because everything in your life will look different to you.
In your book, you talk about the 5 pathways to deep shift. Could you share those with us?
For me, again, it was meditation. I know for a fact, people that have had near-death experiences, without a shadow of a doubt, they have that phenomena, that total shift in consciousness. There is no going back. For other people, it could be a cancer scare. Like I said before, a divorce, losing your job. It's something that absolutely changes the consciousness in your universe, and then you are not the same.
So in your book, you talked about becoming a shifter. What does that mean?
I started getting really good at navigating the world from this new perception. And I began to realize that I had always had a deep sensitivity. I just didn't really understand it. It was Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person, that really helped me understand why I felt the way I did, why I acted the way I did in the world, and how I perceived things. So taking that information and realizing my sensitivity played a huge role in this, and having a major shift in consciousness, I kind of married the two ideas and began to understand that this had always been in me, this idea of being a shifter, someone that's capable of major shifts in consciousness, and then being able to navigate those waters.
And teach others how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was like a natural desire. Like once I had that experience, it was only after I learned to meditate, it was only a couple weeks later that I found myself working with Oprah Winfrey's team and doing a ton of public speaking. And I mean, I had never done that before. I was in the restaurant and bar business. So it was a new life, but these natural abilities came out in me that were probably lying dormant. And that desire to help other people, it almost felt like that was all that mattered.
In your book, you share about how you had this instant realization that everything you thought you knew is all wrong. How did that come to be?
It just happened. It was like, wow, I thought the world was one way, but it's not. Everything felt like opposite land to me. So I think I was under the impression like, you graduate high school, you go to college, you get married, you have a family, you get a job, da, 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 da. But then I realized like, no, there is no straight path. It's not like that. Anything could happen at any time. The world is not what it seems. And there was a much deeper, richer world inside of me that I had never tapped into. And it opened up just the idea of like, you can do anything, like you can manifest things, you can have experiences that are not ordinary. And we can all do that. You can have a deep, deep spiritual life with a knowing instead of just reading a book and having an understanding about something. Like those realizations, they came on fast and strong. And, for instance, I was a comparative religious studies major in college. I had always been interested in religion and spirituality, and I read, I don't know how many books and wrote papers, but it wasn't until I had that direct experience with God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, that I felt like I really understood what true spirituality was. Everything else was just vanilla.
You often hear about that where people go through these experiences and it changes everything. Yeah, it has.
Everything.
Oh my gosh. Well, how did that also work with your relationships? Did that change your relationships?
It did. I didn't have the same desire to, go to parties all the time, be around large groups of people. I kind of wanted to just be quiet and spend more time alone. My inner world felt extremely rich and lively and entertaining. So it was like I didn't need as much outside stimulation, or just I didn't even feel like reading books or watching TV or anything like that. So whereas before, I wanted to be out all the time and with friends all the time and always have a boyfriend and those types of things. And that all changed. I felt whole just on my own. So I began to be a little bit more selective on who I would spend time with, because being alone was so fulfilling.
In your book, you talk about how you also were able to see people differently and notice their emotional responses. It sounds like you were very present for everything that you were a part of.
I felt and feel very present. It's like there's like a pause button inside of me when someone's speaking to me, and it's like it probably wouldn't be noticeable, but to me, it's almost like I can reflect on what's happening in that moment and have a deeper understanding of maybe where that person's coming from. I tend not to get angry at people or frustrated, because I seem to be able to understand where they're coming from. And if there's some emotional unrest in them, it's my attention shifts to like, well, how can I help them, instead of feeling like I'm angry towards them or something like that. It's like I can see deeper now into people.
What a gift that is. My goodness, Well, when we talk about changing the relationships, do you feel that maybe that's why when people have these kind of shifts that maybe they're a little bit afraid, they're going, gosh, I like my relationships the way they are. I don't want them to change.
Oh, absolutely. It's all of that. I mean, your whole world changes and you're just going along before and everything's kind of honky dory and you have your friends and your family and your life. And all of a sudden that gets turned upside down because you don't have the same desires or motivations anymore. So what do you do with that? You have to work through a lot, even though you might be feeling, um, energized and excited about life and everything seems magical, but you still have to, you still got to do the laundry. So that's part of the process. And I think it's set up that way so you don't spiritually bypass all of your stuff. I mean, when this happened to me, I would go outside and just be in awe of the trees and the birds, and everything was so beautiful to me. But I still had this notion of, you have been through a lot. You should probably talk to a therapist and actually keep working on yourself. And I felt like I was able to move through any traumas faster, and with more clarity. But I knew inside myself, like I couldn't just ignore that because that does not go away. And that's part of like the growth process. So to enjoy the changes and becoming this different person is wonderful, but you can't then just turn your back on your whole past life. And you also have to deal with how to move forward in a way that's authentic to yourself.
How does our body and our physical health come into play with all of this?
Well, I think you can have all sorts of um sensitivities to food, smells, your environment. I know I became much more sensitive, especially to the food I was eating, and I had to change my diet. I don't do well anymore, like in bright lights in big box stores and stuff like that. That was overstimulating to me. And maybe before I would have said, like, oh, you're making that up in your head. But it's been going on for so long that I started realizing, like, wait, why am I working against myself? Like, this is who I am now. So I started keeping track of what makes me feel good and what doesn't make me feel good. And I just now avoid the best I can things that I know will harm me.
When you look at the transformation that you've made, could you have really kind of identified that this is where you would be now?
Never in a billion lifetimes. Never. I could have never foreseen this coming. It didn't matter that I was interested in spirituality or studied or read or talked to people. None of that could have prepared me for the experience I had. It's almost unexplainable.
Do you find that people will have a focus on some purpose after they have a deep shift?
I do. I do. And I think that purpose usually comes in the form, again, of helping others. I know that's all I really cared about. I gave up a six-figure job to make $15 an hour, but I just wanted to help people. It was like my new purpose. And I'm not saying that's forever, but it does live in your heart, like, hey, I'm here to help the world, help others. It's not all about me. Your ego is not, driving the bus anymore. So yeah, definite shift in that area also.
In your book, you talk about opposite land. What
Mhm.
is that?
It's kind of back to that idea of like everything I thought I knew was wrong. It's the opposite of what you think your life is going to be like or who you think you are after you have an experience like this. For example, again, I had been in the restaurant and bar business. I had been living in Chicago in the city for almost 20 years. That was my life, traveling, cocktail dresses, working hard, playing hard, that fast life. And after having this experience, I realized that that wasn't me at all. I was just like almost living a programmed life. That's what I had always done. So I kept doing it. And I found myself moving to the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and out on, 14 acres. So I could write a book and be by myself and be quiet. It was like I had entered opposite land. And, of course, everyone around me thought, what is going on with her? But I just was tapping into who I really was, which was a pretty quiet person. Now, I love my friends and I still like to go out, once in a while and stuff like that, but really I was this quiet, introspective, deep person that was the opposite of what I was projecting into the world before this happened.
So, in your book, you talk about how meditation was so important. And I'd love for you to expand on that for us.
Yeah, I mean, not only did meditation, that was the door I walked through that allowed this to unfold inside of me. But since then, because I meditate, I feel like I have a calm mind. All of this feels smoother. Even things can happen in my life that are, pretty extreme, and I can handle them with a calm mind. I feel like my health is better. Like everything is better when I meditate. It just, above all, it just turns down the noise.
So, when people go through these major shifts, do they feel like they don't have anyone to call or get in touch with? Um, there's really nobody that would understand them.
100%. I mean, that's really, like I said, that's why I wrote the book, because that feeling of who am I going to talk to? Like, especially if you start having very different types of experiences, it's hard to wrap your mind around it because you probably don't have anyone in your inner circle that really understands that. So I know I write about it in the book, and I always tell people, like, you have to find other people that understand these higher states of consciousness and what comes with that, so they can discuss it with you, make you feel, like you're not going crazy. This is normal, actually. And for me, when I randomly moved to this town in Iowa, I found an entire group of people that understood me. And I mean, I consider them, my spiritual family now. So I think that's vital, even to get a transpersonal psychologist or just someone in that world that's not going to look at you like you have three heads, because then things get really confusing. Then you isolate, and then it gets way more intense than it needs to be.
Yeah, no one wants to feel like they need a padded room,
No,
when they're
and
going through that.
right. And you do feel like that sometimes because it's so different than how you were before. And it can be very overwhelming and very confusing.
So, after spiritual experiences, I'm sure people have this urge with a new dream. So, how did they identify their dream and follow it?
Well, I noticed a ton of synchronicity in my life after having this initial experience. And it felt as though I really didn't have to think too hard about most things. I was being shown the way. And so I just started really, really paying attention to the signs all around me. And that kept leading me into my future. I mean, it felt as though I just was walking into my destiny. It's not on the thought level. I think, again, when you have an experience like this, you are being shown um, road signs to where you should be going. And inside of yourself, you'll feel like, yeah, that's right. I didn't even know I wanted that, but that's what I want. And it's cool. It's, again, another opposite land type feeling, because we're taught to just think, how are you going to get through this? You better think it through and, really think about it. But you don't have to think about everything. You can get quiet and just be shown what to do.
What were some of the synchronicities that you experienced?
Well, for me, they came on like pretty strong and pretty quickly. I learned to meditate. and immediately started feeling better. Like I said, I was really sick mentally before that. I mean, just hit the bottom of the barrel, and started feeling better, and thought, okay, well, I have a hospitality background, so I'm going to go open a bar and a restaurant because that's all I've ever done. That was like my initial thought. But the universe had other plans for me. So I think one of the coolest examples was a week or so later, my brother's friend was in town and he invited me to go to a concert at a small venue in the city. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go with you. So I met him and it was really cool. And there was a lot of cool people there. And I remember thinking, like, God, even the music sounds different to me. Like everything is so beautiful and intense and great. And I'm just, kind of taking it all in. And at the end of the night, we were going to go backstage with this band, and we were kind of waiting around for the crowd to clear out. And out of nowhere, Winona Judd showed up. And I thought, why is Winona Judd at a Foo Fighters concert at like 2:30 in the morning in Chicago? And next thing I knew, my brother's friend knew her. The three of us started talking, and I was basically staring at her with my mouth open because I had gotten the offer to work with Oprah Winfrey and the David Lynch Foundation. And at first I turned it down because I thought, what am I going to even do there? I don't know how to talk to people about consciousness or meditation. I just learned. And so I told her, this is really strange, but my mom, again, who had passed away that January, now it was May, was obsessed with a performance that Winona Judd gave on the Oprah Winfrey Show. She sang an old Foreigner song, I Want to Know What Love Is. And when I tell you, this was like an ongoing joke in my house. We teased my mom about it. She must have listened to that performance 1,000 times. It was like a whole thing. And I told her, I said, I got offered this job and I turned it down, but I'm sitting here staring at you. And I feel like my mom like put us in this position together. And she said, you have to take that job. This is a clear sign. So stuff like that started happening to me where I was like, okay. And then by that next Monday, I was at work at Harpo Studios.
How exciting that is to get those coincidences. The one that really touched me was the one that when you talk about your house in the country.
Oh, totally saw that in my dreams. I already knew, but I didn't like have a clear map. But I started I had the vision. Then I started thinking, I really want to write a book. Like I've been working at Harpo Studios for 2 years, doing a lot of speaking. I think it's time for me to go out on my own. And I very randomly ended up in this town one 4th of July weekend and thought, I think I'm going to rent a house out here, kind of forgetting that I had seen it already because it was kind of fuzzy. And then when I pulled onto the street and pulled up to the house, I knew that was the house that I had seen, and I had seen the street sign, and I signed the lease right there. And within, again, a couple of weeks, I had quit my job, sold everything I owned, rented my condo in Chicago, and was gone. It was a clear sign.
Yeah, and especially when you've seen it before, and then to have Mary as your next door neighbor too.
That was wild. Like, what are the chances? And I didn't know she was going to be there that weekend either. And I guess I hadn't actually like thought too much about her living here. Because I was always just seeing her in Chicago. I mean, I guess I knew she was here, but I was never here. So I didn't like put that in my awareness. And Mary being one of my closest friends in Chicago, another meditator. And yeah, saying, what's the address of that house? And then realizing she lives next door. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, you can't ask for a better sign than that.
Yeah, I mean, and really those are like great examples of why I didn't have to overthink things, because it's like, how do you have an experience like that and not recognize like this is what you should be doing? I mean, it was beyond obvious. I'd have to be completely blind not to see it. It was in my face. And that's a really nice way to live. It takes a lot of pressure off of you.
I often hear people say that they don't have time to meditate or they're not even sure where to start. What would you suggest?
I feel like meditating actually gives you time, expands time. I am much more efficient. I am clearer in my thoughts and actions. I can get more things done in less time. So again, it's an opposite land moment. It's like you think it's one way, but really it gives you so much more time and energy. Um, I personally learned transcendental meditation, but I think that people should move towards whatever that also just came to me. It's not something I sought out. I didn't know anything about it. A friend suggested that I try it. So I think if someone is interested in a meditation practice, put that in their awareness and then see what shows up and then move towards that.
Such great advice, to do that. And it's interesting. I think 5 minutes of meditation is a lot for most people. And when you start developing that practice, it doesn't really seem like that much time.
No, I mean, I really look forward to it. It's like I meditate 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes early evening. And it's like, it's like I'm on autopilot now. I just do it and think about, how much time you spend on maybe phone calls you don't need to be on, or like watching TV shows or on social media. We all have the time. I've worked with some of the most powerful, busiest people out there, and they find the time. So I always say, like, if Oprah can stop her whole company for all of us to meditate twice a day together, which she did, it's like we can all do that too.
That's just remarkable to have that kind of environment where that's so supported.
Well, I think she learned, I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she learned and really thought this was a powerful thing, and again, wanted to help everyone that was working with her and offered it to everyone in her New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago offices. It was like, what a gift. And I'm sure she felt like it was going to help them be more productive, calmer, and happier in their lives. And like, what boss wouldn't want that for their employees?
Now, when we have our spiritual experience, our shift, can we expect that life will get a little easier?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I think you again have to work through all the things. You can't ignore them. You're not all of a sudden, this enlightened being that you just sit in a room and everything comes to you. It's not like that. But I think once you work through things, really get your life straight and set up the way you want to live, things do become lighter. You are not as tossed around or affected by things that are happening in the world. There's a smoothness, a happiness about you, a peacefulness. And I mean, those are the gifts that come from this. More creative. And I think when you're living, an authentic life and you're really true to yourself, that automatically makes you a happier person.
So, what type of maintenance do we need to do for our spiritual practice?
I don't think you need to overthink that either. It's if you feel the desire to meditate, do that. I do think you should move your body. I think when you're having experiences like this, there's a lot of energy in your body. And I'm not telling you have to go out and run a marathon, but every day take a walk. If it's cold out, maybe join a local gym and walk the track. Just get the energy flowing. Try and eat the best you can. I mean, food is energy, and I think it would be a natural desire to want to eat well. You have more respect for your body, and get good rest. Sleeping to me is so important. But again, I think like over time, maybe at the beginning, you need to think about these things because you're changing your ways and changing your habits. But over time, I think it just becomes a natural way of being that you say, okay, lights out at 10 o'clock. Like I need to get my rest, or it's really important to me to eat fresh food or to meditate or to take a walk every day. It's like you make those things a priority and they're not a burden anymore. they're just who you are.
Do you find you ever get to a place where it's difficult to dive inward, maybe because of anxiety or self-doubt, maybe some of the usual things that people feel?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for example, I just had COVID. It's been 2 months, and that first month, I didn't have like I was sick for 5 days and then I was fine. It really lasted. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was really intense, and that absolutely challenged me. For the first time in a long time, I had a panic attack. I felt very scared, and like I didn't know how to help myself. I didn't have the answers. It was like I was fighting against something bigger than myself, and I couldn't just like take some echinacea and like be okay. It wasn't like that. I tried, and it was a lesson. It was another lesson in surrender. Like, I don't even think COVID is only a physical disease. I think it's a spiritual disease, because once again, there I was, just, you know, desperate and afraid. And then finally it led me to just say, I give up, like whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. And that's when I actually started getting better. So I knew there was a lesson in there.
Uh, about surrender, you think?
Yeah. For me, yeah. I think for everyone it was different. I was also like working a lot, really pushing the envelope, maybe getting away from how I know it's best to live the life that I know is right for me. It got me back on track, but first it, scared the bejesus out of me.
I think it's done that for everyone who has had COVID, for the most part.
Yeah.
you know.
It also taught me to have a lot more empathy. Like, I knew people were getting COVID, but I kind of thought, well, they'll be okay. And everyone I knew would maybe get sick for a week or two. I did have some friends that it lasted longer, but until it actually happened to me, I didn't, again, it's back to that experience piece. Like, I didn't truly understand how scary it can be. And so now it's like, if I meet someone and they have a cough, I'm like, make sure you get better. Like, take care of yourself. It's like amplified inside of me because it was so intense.
In your book, you talk about, when we go through all this, it's advisable to, take care of that clutter that's in our house.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got rid of everything. I thought to myself, like, I don't need all these purses. I don't need all these shoes. Like, I don't want any of this. And maybe I took it to an extreme, but I just wanted simplicity. I felt like there was energy in all of those items, and clutter in the house was just not appropriate for me anymore. I mean, yeah, it all fits into the same world. It's like that simple, clean, calm world. And I think your home should be your sanctuary. And if you walk in and every time you walk it through the front door, you're holding your breath because you think it's a disaster and you can't find anything, and it's just all jumbled up, like, that is not supporting you, and it's not adding to the flow of life that you certainly are moving towards.
And it's interesting. I often hear when people talk about clutter in the home, it's showing that there's clutter somewhere in our lives that we need to take care of.
100%. And I actively look for things in my life and notice, like, is that working for you or is that not working for you? And I've gotten really good at pivoting. No, that's not appropriate for me anymore. I no longer do that. Or, yeah, I love that. Like, I want more of that in my life. And clutter to me leads to, feeling anxious, a little overwhelmed, kind of clutter in my mind. It doesn't work for me.
Where do you think most people get stuck when they experience a deep shift?
I think it's that leap from that old life to the new life. That's why I think it's vital to get some sort of support and really start paying attention to how you want to live, because that inner guidance is moving you in the right direction. But it's the mind you have to get past. Like, it's the I always did it that way feeling, because that's not going to work for you anymore. And that's the inner struggle.
So, how do we get to this place where we're feeling ourselves and our space with like a high vibe energy?
It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. Um, you have to be gentle with yourself, baby steps, little things at a time. Just even saying no to an invitation that you don't really want to go to, and noticing how good you feel when you do what's right for you. I recommend that people get a notebook and carry it with them and write down these experiences like, hey, I finally said no, I'm not working overtime, or no, I don't want to go on that date. Whatever it is, and really listening to their inner voice and seeing how they feel after that. Especially like, you interact with so many people in the world, and some people are not appropriate for you. And if you get off the phone with someone and you feel awful, you don't feel better or uplifted, that is a clear sign that at this point in time, like that person is not the best energy for you. So you just make a note of it and maybe don't, engage as much with that person. It's no big deal. You might not be appropriate for them either. But to keep doing things over and over again that don't work for you, that's what keeps you stuck and frustrated and anxious. It's the opposite of freedom.
And all the things we don't want. And should we take inventory of our current partner or relationship just to see where we're at with that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, I think that changes a lot for people too, because one person in the relationship changes so much. And then you feel like, well, am I with a stranger? Like, I don't even know who this person is anymore. And for the person that's having the shift in consciousness, like that might not be the type of partnership they want to be in anymore. And that can be very challenging, because what are you supposed to do? I mean, that's going to take some work to figure that out. But at the end of the day, no matter what, you have to be honest with yourself and true to yourself, and hope and pray that you can handle things with grace and not hurt too many people along the way. But you have to come first, and not in a selfish way. It's more like you need that to survive and thrive in the world.
Yeah, a real authentic way of approaching life.
A real authentic way of approaching life that will bring you so much happiness, a feeling of freedom, expanded awareness, like all the good stuff. But like I said, you're going to have to do some work, especially, if you're in a relationship or maybe living in the wrong place that no longer is working for you. Like, you got to clean that up.
And see, and maybe we're seeing something different in the relationship that we couldn't see before. Maybe it's a disempowering relationship, and going through this deep shift that we're going through, we're kind of feeling, this is not going to work for me anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it this way, like when you met the person, maybe you were in a totally, totally different place. I always found it interesting, like, of course, this is not for everybody, but people that get married when they're like 19 or 20, like, God, I think you've probably changed like 5 times since you're, 60 years old. I wonder what that's like. And I think some people can do really well with it. They can grow together. I think it's vital that both people in the relationship are growing. One can't be doing all the work. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but it's a tough one. But after a while, it'll become totally unbearable if it's wrong for you. And that's just what it is. Then you'll have to get out no matter what. So you can do it now when it's easy, or later when it's way harder.
Yeah, just to follow your intuition and that gut instinct.
Yeah. And again, if you need to talk to someone and, talk it through and really analyze it and spend time, you're probably going to come to the same conclusion, because I feel like you already know. But if you need to do that for yourself, then, well, that's just what you do.
It's getting that confirmation. Now, in your book, you talk about daily routines. So how important is it to have a good daily routine?
I think it's really important. And again, that adds to your peace. It's not like every day you wake up and wonder like, well, how am I going to do this today? What am I doing? It's kind of like you wake up, you know what you're going to eat for breakfast, you meditate. It brings a sense of calm into your life to kind of just have a routine. I'm not saying you have to do the same thing day after day, but those things that make you feel good, I think those should be staples in your routine every day.
And then have it outlined that this is something we're doing on a daily basis, no matter what, because it feeds our soul.
Yeah, I mean, non-negotiables. And maybe it's two things. Maybe it's drinking lemon water in the morning and taking a walk at sunset, whatever it is. And then you can expand on that as you find other things that make you feel real good. And I mean, I think it'll change your life.
In your book, you talk about hurt people hurt people. And isn't that the truth? We've heard that quite a bit. So how do we get to this place where our transformation is helping other people to transform?
You have to do the inner work. It goes back to the other conversation about, just because you have this spiritual awakening, it doesn't mean that you just ignore everything else that's happened in your life, because it's going to come back to haunt you in one way or another. It's going to show up in your relationships. It's going to show up in how you treat yourself, how you treat others. So you have to really take a deep look inside, take a look at how your family hurt you or how you've had, disappointments in your life, all of that, and really come to terms with it. And eventually there's hardly anything left. You're kind of clear in a way of all of that. And that allows you to help way more people. You have the energy. You are not walking into situations with a chip on your shoulder. You're not one of those hurt people that hurt people. You're a loving person that loves people because you love yourself.
And it shows.
And it shows, and everybody can feel it. When you walk in a room, you're light. And that is so beautiful and helpful. But it doesn't just automatically happen. Like, there has to be some effort on your part. And it can be really difficult to look at situations in your life that hurt you. It's hard to go back and deal with that. But I promise, if you do, you're opening yourself up to a really fabulous time on this earth.
So when we look at our complete experience, and you mentioned this, it takes time. Is this something that people really need to just dedicate a little bit of time to every day?
I think you need to find the right process for yourself, whether it's a therapist or journaling, reading books that interest you, that you feel they can help you. I think you can work a lot of stuff out meditating too. It kind of like quiets your mind and your nervous system to the point where you can think more clearly and process things better. So, yeah, I think you need to figure out what is best for you, but just make sure that you're actually dealing with all the stuff. You're not just giving it a light touch and thinking, oh yeah, I'm more awake now, so it'll be fine. It doesn't really work that way.
It seems like everything then comes to the forefront to be dealt with when that happens.
It does. It'll just show up in your life, and then it'll be harder, and then you can't avoid it, and it'll be some like weird situation, and then you'll realize like, oh, well, that's why this is happening. I screamed at my kid because my mom always did that to me, or I don't know, whatever the case may be, it'll show up if you don't deal with it, because one way or another, you're forced to deal with a lot of stuff. I mean, that's what makes the world so interesting. It's like a giant classroom.
What do you want readers and our listeners to take away from your book?
Above all, I really want them to feel like they're not alone. There's someone out there that understands them. There's help out there. And there's a way to navigate these waters that doesn't have to be overwhelming and can lead to all the gifts that are out there for us.
Well, Valerie, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
I am on Facebook and Instagram, and it's just my name, Valerie Gangas. Plus, my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, all the major platforms. And my website is valeriegangas.com.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you. I had a wonderful time.
Well, thank you, Valerie. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, In Deep Shift, Writing the Waves of Change to Find Peace, Fulfillment, and Freedom. In Deep Shift is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.